Oh, hello, and welcome to Agentforce Now Code Live. My name is Charles, and I am delighted to be your host for this month's Code Live. We have a really special show coming up for you today. We are going to be talking about Agentforce Vibes, Salesforce's newest, latest, and I would say greatest innovation. It's a purpose-built AI coding assistant specifically to help you build your Salesforce applications faster, easier, and best of all, it's free. So for the next 45 minutes to an hour, I'm going to be showing you how to get started, how to use it, and we're going to be building an app. We're going to be building the app that I like to use to learn a new language or a new platform. We're going to be building a to-do app. If you can build a to-do app, you can build pretty much anything. Okay, so before we get started, I want to remind you, as always, that Salesforce is a publicly traded company. So you should only make your purchasing decisions based on generally available features, not any forward-looking statements that I may make in this presentation or any future presentation for that matter. But I'll always remind you. I also want to remind you up front that we are constantly and consistently delivering content just like this. We're doing code lives, we're doing AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, we're shipping videos, we're creating blog posts. So make sure to stay in touch by following us in all of the apps, including YouTube. All right. Cool. Now, before we get started, I'm just going to hop into the chat to see where everyone's coming from. So I see some familiar faces here. I see Sally. Hello, Sally. Great to see you. Sally is a community member that creates a lot of cool content, including some content around Agentforce Vibes. I saw a video from Sally that was really, really cool. So you should check that out as well. I always love to see community content. I want to say hello to Conrad coming in from California, Elaine from Canada, Donald, Faisal. So many people have joined us for this Code Live. It's going to be really, really great. So I am going to give you a quick rundown of the agenda for today. So here's the game plan. I'm going to go through a brief presentation to introduce you to Agentforce Vibes. That's number one. From there, we're going to hop right into Visual Studio Code, and we're going to start building an application. I'm going to take you through all of the different parts of Agentforce Vibes, how to get started, how to download it on Visual Studio Code, and then we'll just get started and we'll jam from there. Does that sound like a plan? I think it sounds like a plan. No one said it sounded like a plan in the chat yet, but I think it sounds like a plan. All right. So I have a nice little presentation here. And I'm just going to switch on over to my screen share. And we're going to just do our nice little introduction to Agentforce Vibes. All right. Cool. Now let's give our presentation the spotlight here. So let's talk about Agentforce Vibes. Okay. So Agentforce Vibes, as I said before, is a purpose-built AI coding agent to help accelerate development with Salesforce. Now, you need just a few things with Agentforce Vibes. The first thing you need is your imagination and prompting skills. You need your imagination to come up with what you want to build, and you need your prompting skills to express what you want to build to this coding agent, which is going to take your imaginative ideas and your prompts and actually build applications. Okay. The next thing you're going to need are some basic developer tools. Specifically, you're going to need Visual Studio Code, which is free, and you're going to need the Salesforce DX extensions, which include Agentforce Vibes, which is also free. You're going to need Agentforce Vibes, which is, again, part of the VS Code extension pack, as I said. And then finally, you're going to need some MCP servers. Specifically, the only one you'll really need is the Salesforce DX MCP server. And that's going to be already configured when you download and start using Agentforce Vibes. And as for what it looks like, You can see it here on the right-hand side. It's just a nice little panel inside of Visual Studio Code, and you interact with it much like you interact with other AI agents like your Chat GPTs and your Claudes and your Geminis. You write some text, it interprets your text, then it takes action. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about MCP, or Model Context Protocols. This is essentially just a layer that sits between um, AIs and APIs so that you can expose tools to those AI agents so that they can take action. Now, the one that we're going to be focused on today is called the Salesforce DX Model Context Protocol Server. Now, this is a server that has 66 tools and counting that helps your AI agents, whether that's Agentforce Vibes or something else, even handle things like org management, data operations, metadata operations. So that means deploying and retrieving metadata. There are some tools related to code analytics, DevOps Center, and more. There's one that you can use to like send your agent a Figma, which is really useful. So there's a ton of different capabilities inside that single Salesforce DX model context protocol server. And it's free and it's already configured, which is really, really nice. And if you want to add additional MCP servers, maybe you have some other applications that you use that would be useful for your agent to have access to, well, you can use them with Agentforce Vibes as well. Cool. Okay, this is my last slide. And then we're just going to get straight to the code. So let's talk a little bit about responsible AI assisted development, or responsible vibe coding. It's important to know the limits of vibe coding. Okay. So here's what it's not about. It's not about eliminating the need of developers or developer skills. You still need to know what you want to build. You still need some basic understanding of architecture and code. You still need to be able to debug things. It's not going to help you capture your business requirements. AI cannot, or at least should not, think for you. So when it comes to figuring out what to build, right, and what the requirements are, that's still on you. And you're going to see that when we talk about creating a spec and rules with Agentforce Vibes. And then third, it's not there to make architectural decisions as it relates to your application or your org. Those are long-term decisions that can never really be captured in a chat message with an AI, right? If you are always the architect, you're always the product manager, the vibe coding agent is just like a junior developer that does some of the hands-on grunt work. Okay. So here are the things you want to make sure that you're doing. First, never vibe code in production. And in fact, I want to show you how to make it so that you can't really vibe code in production, or at the very least, you can't connect Agentforce Vibes to a production org. Limit your vibe coding to prototyping. So use it to make quick prototypes and then harden the code from there. Always review the generated code from any AI coding assistant, right? For security and performance. Just because it runs doesn't really mean it works, right? And then lastly, watch out for technical debt. All AI coding assistants generally very greatly accelerate how quickly you can write code. And that can be a good thing, but that can also be a really bad thing because it means that you can generate a ton of code, and with code comes technical debt. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see what we have here. We got lots and lots of folks here. All right, great. So we are going to hop into Visual Studio Code and we're going to just start building some stuff. But first, I'm going to give you a quick tour of the extension. So let me go ahead and I'm going to share a new window here. Just give me a second. Screen's acting a little finicky here. Alrighty. Okay, so we have Agentforce Vibes open here. All right, so first things first, you're going to need Visual Studio Code. You can download this for free. Just go on Google, type in Visual Studio Code, and you'll find a link to download it. Right, that's the easy part. When you download Visual Studio Code, it's going to come with Microsoft's AI coding agent, which is called Copilot. Now, sometimes this can take up more real estate than you might want. So a tip that I learned from my colleague Philippe earlier today is that you can actually just kind of turn this off if you like. So I'm just going to do that. So I'm going to go to settings. You can do that by going to command and then I think comma. Let's see here. I think it's command comma. Yep. And then you type in AI. I think it's chat. I think it's chat. Yep. And you click disable AI features. And now that's gone. Okay. The next thing you're going to want to do is just make sure that you have the right extensions. So I'm going to open up my extensions here. And at base, you're going to need the Salesforce extension pack expanded. This one right here, this comes with Agentforce Vibes, which is the AI coding assistant. All right. Now, if you have it downloaded, you'll know because you'll see this really cool little logo of Cody here, or Vibe Cody, I think is his name. And you have your coding agent. It lives all in here. Now, there are a variety of different things that you can do. It comes with some example commands. There are some special, let's say, what would I call these? Not macros, I guess shortcuts that you can use. At helps you navigate files, context, and metadata. Slash works with commands. And if you want, you can take the tour. Now, instead of taking the tour, I'm going to walk you through it. Now, within Agentforce Vibes, you, of course, have your box here to actually communicate with the agent. And that's generally what you're going to be doing, typing, reviewing code, giving instructions. But before you do that, you'll want to make sure that you have everything configured. Now, when it comes to AI coding agents, there's really two things, and this is true of most agents, that you want to think about. Rules for the agent to abide by for your particular project, right? And then tools. So let's start with tools or MCP servers. If you click on this little logo here, I'm going to enhance this here, manage MCP servers, you can see all of the different MCP servers that Agentforce Vibes has access to. So if we click here, we can see our MCP servers and what's configured. We have Salesforce DX configured. And if we click into it and break it out, we can see all of the different tools that we have access to. Now, in my presentation, I showed that there are 66 plus. I have 33 because I've configured my MCP server to only show a certain subset of tools. And you can do that just by clicking configure MCP servers and then configuring the different arguments, right? So in the case of the Salesforce DX MCP server, we have like multiple different tool sets. And I just picked the tool sets that I like to use, which are tools for essentially interacting with my orgs, my datas, users. So like assigning permissions, metadata, retrieving, deploying data, testing. And then there's another really cool tool called LWC Experts that you can use to help the agent understand how best to write Lightning Web components. There is a guide for how to configure the Salesforce DX MCP server on the GitHub repo, and I'll show you that. I'll show you that link a little bit later, but you can find it online. Just type in Salesforce DX MCP GitHub, and you'll find it. It's right there in the README. The next thing you'll need to do when you're done with your MCP server is just to configure your rules. Now, rules are really important because they give your agent context on best practices, as well as like what you might be working on. Now, when you download Agentforce Vibes, it's going to come with a variety of different rules. So you're going to have general rules. You're going to have LWC rules, and these are automatically configured and turned on. You'll also have some rules that are turned off that you can optionally turn on. I just keep these two on because these are generally all I need. Now, you can also make your own rules. Now, workspace rules are rules that just kind of relate to your particular Visual Studio Code workspace, and they live inside your project. So I have one workspace rule that kind of defines the project that I want to build and how I want to build it. And this is where you're going to do what we call at Salesforce spec-driven development. So if you click on edit, you can see the rules that I built here. I'm going to, let's see here. I think I'm going to close out of Agentforce Vibes for a moment. Okay, and make this a bit bigger. Now, I'm not going to walk you through it, right? But I want to build a to-do app, and I have some general rules that I like to use that I modify for each project. So in this case, we're going to build a to-do app. I create a custom object. I create it. It's going to have a custom controller. It's going to have a Lightning Web component. It's going to have a test file. And I just have rules that articulate how I want all of those files to be made. You don't have to make them as descriptive as I have here, but I find that I'm like very opinionated. So I have a lot of rules. You don't have to do it that way, but you'll generally have some type of rules, right? And it's really easy to make rules inside of Agentforce Vibes. You just click this plus new rules file inside of rules. Okay, so let's build our app. Let's build our app. As a matter of fact, let's build something basic to start. Let's start with a simple Lightning Web component. Now, before you can actually use Agentforce Vibes, you're going to need to authenticate with an org. Orgs manage just essentially like how manage the request limits and stuff like that, because Agentforce Vibes has 50 premium requests where you are interacting with GPT-5 or Claude or what have you. And then after that, you're on free, you're kind of on like the free plan. So you want to authenticate with an org. Here, I have a Scratch org. Those limits count per org. So if you have a good amount of Scratch orgs, like 6 for a dev edition, you can have 6 times 50 requests per day, which is pretty nice. But anyway, let's build our first Lightning Web component here. And we're just going to build a really basic button. We'll start here. And this is just going to be a nice little warm up. We just type our request, and Agentforce Vibes is just going to start coding. So whenever Agentforce Vibes takes action, if it is an edit, it makes a new file, it will ask you for confirmation to keep you in the loop. So click save to save the file. Now, if I don't want to do that, I can add edit to auto approve. And the next time it creates a file like this component, this color button.js file, it will actually, it will not request any confirmation from me. So right now it's creating a file, and it created the file, and it didn't even need confirmation. So it's created our template. It's created our JavaScript file. It's looks like it's about done. Now, the button that I asked for is a button that has a change color label that will change colors every single time I click it. And this is just to see how it works. Now, when Agentforce is done, it's going to tell you that the task is completed. So it looks like it completed my task. So very easily, you can write a relatively basic prompt, get some code out, and you'll have a Lightning Web component. Now, the next thing you'll want to do is to, of course, deploy this, right? Or test this. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and click start a new task. And I'm just going to ask to actually deploy this button. So let's go ahead and give that a try. Deploy the color button LWC. Now, when it comes to deploying code, that's when the Salesforce DX MCP server comes into play. Now, in order to do this, the Agentforce Vibes needs to know what my target org is. So it's going to ask me a question. This is something you'll see whenever you give a vague instruction. The agent will actually ask you, what do you mean? Right? So I'm going to select use my default org. It's going to use the get username tool. This just allows it to see what my Scratch org's alias happens to be. And then it's going to attempt to deploy my metadata to my target alias. So here we can see a bunch of information here, but we can see at the bottom here that success is true. And we can further see that this is right because, again, we have task completed, right? So it was able to deploy my Lightning Web Component. Now, in most cases, I would have to add this component somewhere to actually see how it works. But there's actually a new extension that's in beta that allows you to see it from the comfort of your Visual Studio Code IDE. Okay. This one, see here. This one's called the live preview, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like first. So if you open up your command palette and you use open in Lightning Preview, this will actually open the Lightning Web Component inside of your IDE so that you can test it. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to load. It can take a minute while it's loading. Oh, there it is. So this was just a Lightning Web Component to change color. And it works just like that. And so you can write code, deploy code very easily with Agentforce Vibes. Now, in the next section, I'm going to go ahead and try to actually build an app. But before I do, let's see if we have any questions in the chat. Okay. So we got a few questions. Okay. Here's one. Here's one right here from Giorgio. I hope I got that right. If the day limit for the premium model is based on the org, what if two developers are working on the same org? Do they have a shared maximum of 50 requests per day, or do they each get 50? So it is based on orgs, and that's a really great question. It is, in fact, based on orgs. So the way that I tend to handle the limitations for Agentforce Vibes is I have my developer edition, right? My developer edition org, it has, I think, a limit of 6 Scratch orgs per day, right? So what I do is when I run out of requests, I roll a new Scratch org, right? I deploy my metadata, and then I keep working, right? And so the best way I would say to approach this is to take a source-driven approach, pull down the metadata that you need using the metadata explorer, right? So like, authenticate into your whatever org you develop against, right? And then just use the org browser and grab whatever metadata you need, right? So if I need to grab a class, I'll grab the class, right? And then create a Scratch org. Just create a Scratch org, right? Create your Scratch org, deploy your metadata to the Scratch org, and work against the Scratch org, right? Or if you want to live dangerously, you shouldn't do this, or you can always authenticate to a Scratch org, but then deploy to a different org, right? Just because you're authenticated to an org doesn't mean that you have to deploy to that org. If you use the CLI, you can set your target org, right? So that's what I do. A really, really great question. Really great question. Okay, let's see. Another question. Do we need to install the Lightning Preview extension, or is it an SF command? This is an excellent question. You do need to install an extension. It's actually a beta extension. So let me show it to you here. It is called Salesforce, and I'm going to close the Lightning Preview for now. Salesforce Live Preview. And as you can see, it's in beta. But if you search for it, you should be able to find it. It is an incredible tool. I highly recommend using it. Great question. Also, will my session be recorded and shared? Yes, it will be. And let's see. And then we got one from Amy. How about building something like a little complex, like creating an app that pulls current weather forecast for next day and suggests the best spots for one day trip? I think you could do that. You might run out of requests if you're only using one org, but entirely possible. You would need to have a very, very good spec where you make the decisions, right? But it's totally possible. We're going to move on to building a slightly more complex app. We're going to build a to-do app. Again, a to-do app is a great app to build because it demonstrates the core capabilities of any app. You are going to read data, you're going to write data, you're going to update data, you're going to delete data, right? Almost every app is just that. Instagram is basically just that if you don't include the really complex social graph and algorithms for showing what, determining what shows up on the feed. At the end of the day, most apps are just CRUD apps. Create, read, update, delete. Okay? So let's build our first CRUD app. Okay? So we're going to close out of all of this. We're going to close out of all of it. Okay? Live preview. We're going to close out of our live preview for now. We're going to hop back into Agentforce Vibes, and we're going to start a new task. There's a reason I'm going to do this. The more interactions you have in a task or a conversation with an agent, the bigger the context window, right? The more information in the context window, over time, the performance of the AI agent degrades. This is not specific to Agentforce Vibes. This is in general. They all work this way. It's a fundamental part of how large language models work. Generally, the more information you give them, the worse they get. So we're going to start a new context window by creating a new task. Okay. Cool. So let's build that more complex app. Here is my prompt. I'll make this nice and big so everyone can read it. Build a to-do app with an Apex controller and Lightning Web Component using a to-do C object. The task is considered complete when you finish writing code for the Apex controller and Lightning Web Component. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and launch that. All right. So I'll make this a little bit smaller, but a little bit wider. And we'll see that Agentforce Vibes creates a plan. Look at this. This is a checklist of what it needs to do so it can track its progress. Okay. Okay. So here we can see Agentforce Vibes coding. And it's going to start off with the to-do controller, the Apex controller. Why do I call that out? Well, because it's really cool that Agentforce Vibes has an understanding of the different dependencies within the app, right? If you're going to build a Lightning Web Component and it's powered by Apex code, you're going to have to start with Apex code, right? Because the Apex determines how you're going to write the JavaScript file in the Lightning Web Component, right? And so you can see here that Agentforce Vibes is doing that. What you can also see is that Agentforce Vibes is able to see when there are linting errors and self-correct, okay? Now, looking at this file, you can see it's commented. Agentforce Vibes made the decision to, I don't know if you saw this, to create a data transfer object. I didn't specify that. It's a legitimate choice. I might tell it to not do that depending on the results. But as you can see, it's like pretty good code. It's the type of code you would expect from a more experienced dev. Similarly, here inside of the to-do manager Lightning Web component code, you can see that it's tracking state. It's still using track, which I don't believe is necessary any longer for Lightning Web components, but there's probably a lot of examples of that in the training data because historically Lightning Web components needed track. And here it's creating the template. And again, you can see that it has an understanding of how this works, right? It starts with the JavaScript, then builds the template because the template depends on the JavaScript. Okay. And again, it's seeing some linting errors. So it's fixing those linting errors without any prompting from me. Okay. It's taking a little bit of time. All right. Let's see what it's doing here. And while it's doing that coding, I'm going to check for questions here. Excellent question from Sally here. Is it better to include the prompt in the prompt, the object as context, including the at, or is it enough to type its API name? Hope Agentforce Vibes will go read the file object itself. Um, Generally, it's better to actually type reference the object. That's a really great tip. I'm going to just show you what Sally's referring to. So if you type in at, you can essentially inject context into your prompts. So if you type at to do, come on, we doing this today? Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Maybe there was a reason I forgot to do that. Let's see here. To do. There we go. If you type at to do, you can point to the folder that contains the, you probably can't see it because of the comment itself. But what I was saying before is if you want to show context for an object, you can actually reference it by just doing at, and you can inject the entire object's context. And that's a really good practice. In general, it'll probably find it anyway. Like if you mention an object by name, it'll almost certainly find it, but it's better to be precise and just include it in context. Okay. So as we were talking, Agentforce Vibes wrote our app. So let's see here, and we can see in task completed, we get a summary of what it did. For the Apex controller, it did make a DTO. Not really sure how I feel about that. For the Lightning Web Components, it's using wires for getting both the to-dos and the pick list values. That's really great. API version 665.0, really, really good. So I feel good about this. So our next step is going to be to deploy the app. Now, I showed you that you can use Lightning, you can use the Salesforce DX MCP server to do deployment. In reality, and this is just my personal preference, I try not to use my requests on things that I can do myself, right? If it's more complex like coding, sure, right? But deploying metadata, I can do that already. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to deploy the metadata myself. I'm going to deploy this to do controller. All right, let's see here. And I'm going to show you the errors that I got here. So it looks like there's an invalid character in the identifier description, the due date, all of that stuff here, right? So here are the errors. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion. Here that when Agentforce Vibes made the DTO, it tried to do this, right? Okay. So I'm not a huge fan of this choice here. I'm just using a Lightning Web Component. So I don't think I need a DTO. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to start a new conversation. Okay. I'm going to say, fix these errors in my controller. And I'm going to reference the file controller, my to-do controller. Let's see, to-do controller. Here we go. And I'm going to say refactoring the methods to return S objects instead. I think I think I prefer that. I think I would like it to be a little bit simpler than just returning a DTO. DTO for a pick list value, I think would be okay, but like a DTO um, for just the to do seems like a little bit much, in my opinion. And while it's doing that, I'm going to look at some questions here. So here's a really great question from David. Does Agentforce Vibes work with all the metadata, for example, a minor correction in the flow? And does it work with VF component slash Aura? I haven't tried it with Aura. I have no reason to believe that wouldn't work. You can use Agentforce Vibes on metadata. I would say that it wouldn't necessarily be my preference to do it, but it's absolutely capable of doing it. You can use Agentforce Vibes for metadata, and for certain types of metadata, it performs really really well. If you're creating like a really simple like a custom tab, or you're building an app and it's composed of multiple different things, or you're building a permission set, a relatively simple permission set, it can be really good. If it's very complex metadata, like you have a very complex flow, it might work, but it's better at writing code. Agents in general are really good at writing code. Metadata is a little bit less common than code. Okay. Okay. So I did tell it what to do. It still wrote the DTO. Okay. It's fine. I'm just going to tell it to fix the names, but like, can you fix the names? And this is the first time property names in the DTO, because it's going to keep doing this. But anyway, and this is part of, I would say, vibe coding. This is part of it. It just kind of happens. So it did that, but now it's going to do manager accordingly. All right, so let's see if we have any more questions. All right, really great question here. What would be the licenses and credits attached to this feature? I have really great news. Agentforce Vibes does not require a license at all. It doesn't require you to turn on any flags or anything like that. It's completely free. Your orgs already have it. Your Scratch orgs have it. Your sandboxes have it. You should mostly use Scratch orgs to develop. You should use those instead. But all of your orgs already have Agentforce Vibes, and you have 50 free requests or 1,000,000 tokens, whichever you reach first, per org per day. So you actually don't need a license for this. It is actually free, which is really, really cool. Like free, as in like totally free. And we got another question here. How does it choose which API version to use? Two ways. It'll look at your project to see if you have any references there. In my case, it chose how to use the API version because I specified it in my rules. So I'm going to hop here, and you can see always use API version 65.0. So that's how I determine which API version to use. Okay. So Agentforce Vibes was coding away while I was talking away. And let's see if it managed to fix the problem. I do feel like this particular one, okay, it works. So it deployed the to-do controller just fine. And we're going to deploy the to-do manager. Again, I like to do deploys myself because I want to save my requests to Agentforce Vibes. I don't want to run out of requests earlier than I need to. So just to recap, we had Agentforce Vibes create a to-do controller and create a Lightning Web component. And the next step is just to see what we got, okay? So we can do that using the Lightning preview. So I'm going to go ahead and click open in Lightning preview. I'm going to select to-do manager, okay? And this should open a Lightning preview of to-do manager. Let me close all of these and let's see what we got. All right, we got it. So this is a to-do app, okay? Running in preview. And let's see if it works. You don't know if it works until it works, okay? So we're gonna say create a to-do app live, okay? Set the due date to today. And I think this is a high priority. And I'm gonna set the status to in progress. We'll see if it's done, okay? So we click create and there we go. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now this is what it looks like in live preview. But of course, like a live preview isn't an exact replica of what it would look like in the app. But we are able to actually test it, see it, and this is a pretty faithful representation of what it looks like. The buttons might align slightly differently. If we were to look at this inside of my actual Salesforce app, but we can see what it looks like, and we're done. All right. So I'm going to take a look at a few more questions. I'm going to hide this question here. Let's see here. Another question from Ridian. Don't you have to request Vibes be switched on for a developer org? No, I do not believe you do. I can show you which toggles exist for Agentforce Vibes, and I think that would be a really great idea. So I'm going to just we're going to stop looking at Agentforce Vibes for a moment. Actually, I think maybe let me see here. I'm going to just open up an org. Let me see if I can open up my developer org here so you can take a look. But we can take a look at kind of the Agentforce Vibes options that we have. Okay. But you don't have to request that it be switched on. It's just kind of on. The only thing you can do is switch it off. That is something you can do. You can switch off Agentforce Vibes. So I'm going to just drop my screen for now. Let's see here. And I am going to do a quick one more share here. See here. Okay. Just a moment. Okay. It's been a moment since I've done a live stream, so I'm slightly rusty. Okay. So we're going to share our entire screen here. Okay. So you should see, let me pull up my screen and let's give it more real estate here. Okay. All right. So inside your org, you don't have to turn Agentforce Vibes on, but you can turn Agentforce Vibes off if you don't want someone to be able to connect to an org and use Agentforce Vibes. Okay. So there's a feature here where you can disable Agentforce Vibes for a particular org. And I can show you what that looks like. I'm going to take a quick detour. I didn't plan to go here, but we finished a little early, okay? So if you click this button, let me see here. Should be, let me go ahead and disable it. Okay, it's disabled. I'm going to refresh to make sure it's disabled. Okay, so if you click this button inside of an org, if you try to set that org as the default org inside of VS Code and then go to Agentforce Vibes, Agentforce Vibes won't work. So let me try and do that. So I'm going to just close our preview here. Okay, so I have my Scratch org here, and I'm just going to set it to my Dev Edition org. Look at that. You can't access Agentforce Vibes. And the reason you can't access Agentforce Vibes is because I clicked that button. Now, if I go back to my org, right, I try and do a quick refresh here. Let's see, I'm going to reload my window. So force Agentforce Vibes. It shows up. Okay. So that's, you can turn it off, but you don't have to turn it on. Okay. Let's take a look at some more questions. Here's a really great question about Lightning Preview. Does the data created in Lightning Preview save to the org? Yes, it does. It actually does. It does save to the org. So let's see here. I'm going to switch back to my previous org. I think it was 948. Let's see here. It's 948. It's this one. Okay. Now, if I open up this org, let me open up the live preview again. I'm going to open up our live preview. Two ways to know that that's the case. The first way you know that's the case is if you reload your if you reload VS Code, you'll still see that it has data, right? It still has this data. So it kept state. That's not being cached locally, right? That's just coming straight from the org. The other way to know is if you open the org, okay? You open the org. We're going to grab my tab and put it here. So this is my Scratch org. You open it up. I'm going to go to the To-Do Manager app, right? And you're going to see that it has a to-do. See, that's the to-do that I created. This is another reason why it's so important to use Scratch orgs for development, right? It doesn't matter that I created, live data in my Scratch org. It's only there for like a day or a week or something, right? But when you create data inside of live preview, it creates live data, right? Another thing to notice is that the UI is slightly different, right? It's slightly different. Like if you look at the styling, right? And I think this has to do with my org, not my code or even the preview, but you'll notice that the buttons look a little bit different here and are oriented a little bit differently here than they are inside of Visual Studio Code. See that? So another thing to consider, okay? So that's really it. In summary, Agentforce Vibes is a really cool tool for creating, modifying, updating code and metadata. It allows you to have really, really, really quick dev cycles. Lots of extensibility via the Salesforce DX MCP server, as well as other MCP servers. One other thing I want to show you here, let me see if I can get to it, is that there's a marketplace of MCP servers that you can easily install and configure to give your agents more capabilities to connect with your cloud services, other different types of applications that you may use. There's a bunch apparently for AWS. I don't remember this many being here for AWS, but you can see there's a lot of different things that you can do with your agent and a lot of different tools you can give it access to. Let's take a few more questions. We're nearly at time. Let's see here. Two good questions. Is there a way to trace log to know something is coded, updating using Agentforce Vibes? If you're looking for logs to tell whether or not an application was built by Agentforce Vibes, not really, no. If you're just talking about logs for your conversations from Agentforce Vibes, you can get to those in the Agentforce Vibes extension. Click View All History, and then you can export your conversations, and it'll show you how many tokens you used It'll give you a good idea of how many requests you made, and you can just you can delete these, you can export these. They do take up some memory, but like a very, very small amount because it's just text. Um, so yeah, there are logs for the conversations, but no logs that would tell you that, hey, this was made by Agentforce Vibes. Another question here: what kind of consumption credits does it take for using Agentforce Vibes? Um, Again, you have it's usage based, but it's free. So the first 50 requests to Agentforce Vibes, the first tool uses of Agentforce Vibes, the first 50 messages back to you, go to a premium model, right? You have 50 requests or a million tokens, right? A million context tokens, whichever you reach first, right? Per day. But here's the thing: the requests are free. They're 50 free requests. And when you run out of them, it rolls over to the Salesforce hosted SFR model. Okay. So you can continue to code, but the SFR model is not as good. The core model is not as good as the premium model. The premium model is better. Some more questions. Is there a way? And I think we should just go to question mode at this point. If there's something else I need to show, I'll show it to you. But let's just go to question mode. Move my screen up over here so it's easier to see questions. Is there a way to change LLM models used by Agentforce Vibes? Not at the time. Not at the time, but I would not be surprised if that changes in the future. Let's see here. Here's another really great question. What is the difference between Agentforce Vibes extension and the Agentforce Vibes IDE? Is there license cost attached to the Vibe IDE? This is an excellent question. Full disclosure: Agentforce Vibes IDE is Code Builder. It's Code Builder with Agentforce Vibes. I think the rename reflects the fact that like Agentforce Vibes extension fundamentally changes the way you're going to do development. So they're like, it's the Agentforce Vibes IDE. But Agentforce Vibes IDE is Code Builder, so you need the Code Builder licenses to use Agentforce Vibes IDE. You do not need a license to use the Agentforce Vibes extension, which is the actual coding assistant. Okay. Now, next question. Here's a question from Donald. I did not see your question before, so I apologize. If you pay $20 for ChatGPT and Google AI Studio / Gemini, can you use those subscriptions inside of Agentforce Vibes to get more than the 50 daily credits? Not at the moment. No, that is not the case. You can only use the core models. You can only use either the core model or the premium model. There's no way at the moment that, at least that I'm aware of. You feel free to follow up with me on this one. That allows you to select or like kind of bring your own model. Wouldn't be surprised if that happens. There is some prior art. You can currently bring your own models to use for like prompt builder, for example, using Data Cloud's Einstein Data Studio. But at the moment, you can't do anything like that for Agentforce Vibes. But that is a great idea. And hopefully there are conversations happen about that one, because there are certainly people that have subscriptions to those services. So keep an eye out for it. Okay. Another one: is Agentforce Vibes extension available for JetBrains? No, it is only available for Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio Code based editors. So, for example, I think I've used Agentforce Vibes in Cursor, which is built off of the same open source project that powers Visual Studio Code. So, can't do that. A LinkedIn user asks, can we buy tokens or requests if we run out of premium requests? Not at the moment. You cannot. You can't buy tokens at the moment. That's not an option. It's completely free, but the other side of that is that it's completely free, so there's no way to pay for more. That may change in the future, but Not now. And then we have another question here. Does Agentforce Vibes support bring your own LLM? No, it does not at the moment. It does not. Let's see here. And then we have one more question here. Can you tell us about the MCP server that it uses? Let's close out on this one because it's a really great question. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to screen share, do one more screen share. We're going to wrap this up. Okay. Wrap this one up. Okay. So I do believe you should be able to see. There we go. All right. So this is the Salesforce DX MCP server. This is a public project. And this is the MCP server that powered everything that you saw today when I was deploying metadata, when I was getting my username and org details. I was using this MCP server. It's purpose built for interacting with Salesforce orgs. You can use it with Agentforce Vibes, but you could also technically use it with other coding agents as well, which is kind of nice. It's great that it's open like that. The docs have a really great overview of how it works, but most importantly, it has documentation on how to configure and customize the Salesforce DX MCP server. There are a variety of different flags that you can set that determine which tools are allowed, including tools that might not be generally available. Again, there's like 66 plus tools that you can use. And if you want to learn more about it, you can hop into the MCP client configurations example. I will say that one thing to know about the Salesforce MCP server, the Salesforce DX MCP server, is that it uses, or at least takes advantage of the Salesforce CLI for auth. So you need to have the Salesforce CLI to use the Salesforce DX MCP server. But again, this is free. It's like already loaded and configured on your Agentforce Vibes extension. So it's generally like kind of like turnkey. But if you want to configure it, you can. If you want to use it with a different AI coding assistant, you can. Though I would say it's generally much easier, much better to just do it with Agentforce Vibes. And with that, we are at time. We are at time. Thank you all so much, so much for joining me on this deep dive into Agentforce Vibes. I want to let you know that next week I'm going to be hosting an Ask Me Anything, same time on, I believe, next Wednesday on Agentforce Vibes with the product manager for all things DevOps, the product manager for Agentforce Vibes, and the product manager for the Salesforce DX MCP server. So if there are any questions that I couldn't have answered, or you have any kind of like ideas that you want to throw out there, that is an excellent opportunity to do so. Go into LinkedIn and just say that you're attending, or go to the Salesforce YouTube channel and just like click the bell so that you know when it's going to start, and watch that. Join it live so that you can have your voice heard. It's a really, really rare and great opportunity to be able to interact directly with the people who are building this like new agentic future for Salesforce development. So with that, I want to again close out by reminding you to stay in touch, join the Salesforce dev community, follow us on all the things, especially LinkedIn and YouTube. And have a wonderful day.